Welcome to the Fundamental Market Analysis with Python class. I will show you some critical fundamental indicators that will help you navigate the financial markets and get your own answers to your own questions without having to rely on other people's opinions, on newspapers, the web, all these things. Show you how to get your own answers. So whether you're a trader, a financial analyst, a data scientist, or just a curious person curious about the markets that wants to stay informed, this class is for you. I'll show you where to find free and reliable data, how to analyze and plot that data using Python and Jupyter Notebooks. So I do expect you to know a little Python, not much, but just enough to, because we're not going to cover the basics of Python in this class. So let's take a peek at the curriculum. So we'll start by looking at the S&P 500. Now this is my favorite index, favorite indicator, favorite everything, is the World Economic Barometer. It's comprised of some of the 500 biggest companies in the United States, and as a group, they represent over 80% of all equity market value traded in the US, 80%. And 30% of that is revenue that comes from outside the United States. So it's not even just an American and a US indicator, it's a world indicator. So if you're in a hurry and you only have time for one indicator, that's the one. Here, let me show you the Jupyter Notebook, for example. Here, I'll show you how to, this is after we've already gotten the data. I'll show you where to download it. Then we're going to clean it up. We have to clean it up. We have to prepare it a bit before we can plot it and work it. And then we'll do some simple visualization, right? This is basically, many years of the S&P 500. Look at that run. Phenomenal. We will also then kick it up and look at more complex ways of displaying it. We'll displaying it using, for example, candlesticks. A great way of looking at the markets using candlesticks. In this case, every bar represents 1 year. When the bar is green, as you probably figured out, means the markets are going up. When it's red, it means the markets are going down. So great way of simplifying, of aggregating the data, yet with still retaining a lot of information. And we'll do even more complicated things. We'll even look at, like, for example, custom indicators. In this case, we're looking at the COT, the Commitment of Traders report, plotting it around the dollar index and other ways of looking at it as well, right? So very powerful ways of taking this fundamental data and kind of helping you understand what is going on in the markets. What else? We'll look at the VIX. The VIX, this is a phenomenal index. The VIX is also called the fear index, and it's based on the options of the S&P 500. And I'll give you more details in the class about it. But what's important about the VIX, and what I think is great, it's a forward-looking indicator. It doesn't mean it's always right? Doesn't mean it's like a crystal ball, but it's designed to look at 30 days into the future. That's why it's great. That's why we want to be able to get everybody's opinion, ask the world, what do you guys think is going to happen in the next 30 days? That's the VIX. The VIX will tell it through volatility and through the S&P 500. We'll look at market movements and basics about how the markets works. We'll also look at a series of ways of kind of charting, of displaying data. Things like, candlesticks, relative strength index, moving average, convergence, these kind of things. These are kind of considered indicators. They're not that critical. They're important, but not critical.
В далекие-далекие времена жадные дворяне наживались на неграмотном народе. Хорошо, что у них был знакомый в Шервуде. И сейчас, спустя века, узнать, как пополнять свои кошельки, а не чужие, помогает Sherwood.biz. Он может превратить тунеядца во фрилансера, любителя в настоящего профи. Помочь безыдейному стать гением. Хочешь привлечь клиентов в свое дело, научиться программированию или анимации, а может выучить чужеземные языки? Получить знания, чтобы заработать, тебе поможет Sherwood.biz. Заходи, узнавай, учись.
И позвольте мне сказать вам кое-что еще. Нет стремления более естественного, чем стремление к знанию.
The next part, section 3, is the heart of this class. It's the fundamental indicators. We'll look at the consumer price index, CPI, see how consumers are feeling. We'll look at real estate, that's important. The Case-Shiller index, the CPPI, the VNQ. We'll look at the unemployment and the labor pool. We'll look at bankruptcies, oil and gold, Bitcoin, the yield curve and the inverted yield curve, and what it means when the yield curve is inverted. We'll look at dividends, dividend yield. We'll look at, these are great as well, the BCI and the PMI. The BCI is the Business Confidence Index. The PMI is a Purchasing Managers Index. Now, these are also forward-looking indicators because and they're not really quantitatively based. They're actually surveys that are sent out to many people, business leaders, and they're brought back, compiled, and then you have a feeling of how things are going to be in the next month. So again, a forward-looking indicator. Doesn't mean it's always going to be correct, but it's definitely forward-looking. Unlike, for example, the real estate ones are based on past sales, right? So it's looking at the past. It's still very useful because it's aggregating the information, but it's based on the past. We're looking at retail numbers and a bunch of other things like the commitment of a traders report, which I showed you a taste of. And one thing I need to say, this class is not about teaching trading techniques. So don't ask me, how do I trade or what's the right way or wrong way. There's no right way or wrong way in this class. If you ask me that, I will point you to the Boglehead's investment philosophy, and it's all about people taking investment in their own hands. They don't want to rely on anybody. They don't want a middle person telling them what to do. They want to know it themselves and do it themselves. This is the way to go, in my opinion. So it's all about seeing the big picture. So before I go into the big picture, let me talk a little bit about me. I've been in tech for many decades. I worked at Microsoft for a few years, and after that, I went to Wall Street. I worked on Wall Street for 6 years. Literally, I was right next. My building was touching the American Stock Exchange building when the American Stock Exchange was still open. My job was working with market makers in equity options and taking them from floor traders where they would shake their hands and buy and sell stuff, and bringing them upstairs where they were completely computer generated market making. So that's what I did for 6 years. But prior to that, I also traded full-time for 1 whole year as a retail trader, a quantitative retail trader. And boy, the difference of going from retail to pro, night and day. It's like really, it's when I see people just trading off of technical indicators and not seeing the big picture of all the fundamentals, it feels like what I was doing when I was trading on my own versus as a pro. You are at such a huge disadvantage if you don't look at the big picture, and this is what this class is trying the void is trying to fill. I'm also a host of the ViralML.com show, which does all sorts of shows from tech industry, data science, state of the industry, and also finances. So I get a lot of my ideas from the shows when they're popular. That's when I decide to make a class using that. So I recommend you keep an eye on the channel. And I also have a few books out, including on data science and all sorts of things, including this book. Actually, I have a copy here I can show you, which is the class is also loosely based on. So if you're more of a book person and versus a class person, you can get the book. You'll get, there's definitely a decent overlap in the material. So anyways, I hope you join me from this class. This is really like, going from, in the middle of the night with a flashlight. And when you start looking at the big picture, suddenly it's, the middle of the day and you see everything you need, you can see everything. So I really recommend starting to, take these fundamentals seriously for whatever you're doing. You'll find great value in them. I will be available to answer questions, related to the curriculum. So please join me.